Hello, everyone. My name is Jackie. I'm an alcoholic. Really good to be here. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. And I don't know if this is my first time at this meeting, but I've only been here maybe once or twice before. And I already love the script and the format and the suggestions I've heard. I appreciate this meeting so much because probably, as some of you know, many of you know, this is like an OG Zoom meeting before the pandemic. Um, and so it's been all about accessibility for a really long time. And I really appreciate Young People and Alcoholics Anonymous for that reason. I think there's such a wonderful emphasis on reaching anyone, anywhere in young people's meetings, an openness to change when change is needed, but also a lot of respect for our three legacies, our steps and our traditions, and also our concepts for world service. There are three legacies in AA. That's why we have the triangle as the symbol of AA, the circle and the triangle. I was kind of taught that that symbol meant like the circle represented the world and the way AA has spread all across the world. And it's because of our three legacies. The bottom arm of the triangle is the foundation, which is our individual recovery through the 12 steps. That's how I recovered through the fellowship, but also through doing the 12-step program. And there's also that the unity of our groups, and we stick together because of our 12 traditions. And that's why that I think it's the left arm of the triangle says unity, and then the right arm of the triangle is service. And that's all the different ways we help carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, help alcoholics find sobriety all around the world. And all those three aspects of my individual recovery through the steps and sticking to my, being a part of an AA group and participating and practicing the 12 traditions, as well as being part of the efforts to help AA reach anyone, anywhere through service. And that means service at the meeting level, service with sponsoring sponsees, but also I do service outside of the meeting level. Anyone who has served on a YPOC committee has done service outside of a meeting room level, or if you've done H&I, or you've helped with public information committees, or if you've been a part of general service, or even if you've just attended a business meeting where they're collecting a group conscience about the general service conference, you're participating in general service. And that means you're participating in our third legacy. And so I kind of view my program of AA as a program about the three legacies, that I need all 36 principles of the steps, traditions, and concepts to have like long-term sobriety and long-term happiness and freedom. But luckily, I didn't need to know anything about the traditions and concepts when I first got sober. And that's okay, right? Like we do things first. And so that meant practicing step one, getting a sponsor. Even my first sponsor was a temporary sponsor because I was afraid of commitment. And, finding a home group, which just meant, I'm from San Francisco and I got sober in 2006. So I was really, really lucky in San Francisco, especially at that time. There were over 700 meetings a week to choose from in person. And I mean, I wasn't even aware of online meetings. They've existed for as long as there's been the internet. Alcoholics have been gathering, access to the internet on a wider basis. People have been gathering together to help support each other's recovery. But when I got sober in 2006, I got sober in in-person meetings, and I had a lot to choose from. And so luckily I was able to find a meeting that was full of people that I connected with, that I related to. Because my first couple of meetings, I didn't really relate to a lot of people. My first couple of meetings, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous through an outpatient chemical dependency treatment program. And they handed me a slip and they said, go to AA or CA or NA. They didn't really care. And I came in primarily identifying as a cocaine and pill addict. I didn't really think I had a problem with alcohol. It took a couple of weeks of really listening and once I was able to like listen with an open mind, I began to really kind of look back at my drinking history and really begin to understand that, like, frankly, I have a problem with anything that I can ingest, drink, snort that will change the way I feel. I'm addicted to changing the way I feel. And I do that through many different things, through food, through fantasy, through sex, but shopping. I mean, I can do it all through those kind of things. And then, of course, like alcohol works like that. So does drugs, different kinds of drugs. And they all helped me control the way I feel or attempt to control the way I felt until they got out of control, until the solution, which really I view alcohol as a solution that I had for many years to the problem that I had with living and existing in the world. And when that solution didn't work, I was really scared. And I kept trying to make it work for a really long time. And that's how I found myself in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous through a treatment program. But I didn't like my first couple of meetings, and they were held in the treatment center, like during lunch. And so there was a really lovely secretary who brought in the meeting to the treatment facility, you know, as a part of like maybe H&I or just, you know, as an AA meeting. But there wasn't a lot of like AA meetings from the community attending that. So it was like mostly like just a bunch of people from my groups attending the AA meeting that was held during lunch at the treatment center. So I didn't get a really good sense of what AA can be like. And it wasn't until I graduated from that 2-week outpatient program and I ran into someone I know, and I must have been holding a meeting schedule because they revealed to me on the street that they were a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they gave me their number and told me to call them. And then they circled some meetings they thought I would like. That's one of the biggest ways you can be of service. It doesn't matter if you have like a week of sobriety and you meet someone who has like a day or it's their first meeting and you think there are some meetings they might really dig, telling them about those meetings could seriously save their life, because it's so important for us to connect, and the group is so important for that. And so this person told me about a meeting called High Noon. And it met daily, which was really helpful for me because at that time I hadn't gone back to work yet. And so I must have walked into the High Noon meeting right outside Dolores Park in San Francisco. And I'm 2 weeks sober, maybe right out of treatment. And I walked in the room and it was full of punk rockers and skateboarders and queer people and people with tattoos on their faces and business people. And it was just such an eclectic group of people. Definitely had a little bit of a misfit edge, cool kids club. But that's kind of what I needed. Essentially, like if it had been a bar, it would have been a bar I drank at. That's how I kind of describe it. And that's okay. I think it's very natural that we have a little bit of like bar culture in AA, you know? That's the kind of analogy that works for me, right? And so just like, you know, it's okay if you weren't a bar drinker, you can find another analogy. But for those of us who did, you know, or, you know, it's like, it's like finding a bar you feel comfortable at and picking out a stool, you know? And that's how I feel about my home group. And so I started going to this meeting, High Noon, every day. And I chose a spot like right in the front, near the front. And there was like a table where a bunch of people sat all around, like the secretary and the speaker, but then like other random people would just sit around. And then I found out anyone could sit around the table. So then I went and sat around and grabbed a spot at that table because I like wanted to sit with all the people that, you know, I was 27 when I came into the rooms and I was lonely. And yeah, I wanted to, you know, feel like I belonged and wanted to be cool, whatever, it doesn't matter. And they were very sweet. And I got to just, you know, really, when they talk about being in the middle of the boat, I did that. And so very fortunate, you know, there are a lot of people, there might be people in this meeting here who live in a place where there's only one meeting a week or one meeting a day, or if there is more than, you know, if there's a couple of meetings a day, they might be in the same, you know, clubhouse or the same place and with the same small group of people. And that's okay. Like ultimately, I'd like to believe that that my desire to stay alive would have, gotten me open-minded enough to like stick with a meeting and get to know people. But I was very lucky to live in a metropolitan area where I had a lot of different flavors of AA to choose from. And luckily now with, Zoom, you really do have a lot more options. You have this meeting, for example, right? And if you like the vibe of it, like you can keep coming every week. And there are people here who can tell you other meetings that you might like if you like Fifth Dimension Group. And I think that's super important. Another part of the bar analogy that I think really makes sense for me is I once heard someone say that like, going to AA without doing the steps is like going to a bar and not drinking. You can kind of go for some company and, friendship, fellowship, you can hang out, you can talk, you can maybe meet interesting people. But after a while, you kind of realize that you want to like have fun the way you see other people having fun, and you want to relax and you want to like, be a part of that. And so that really made sense to me. And that was my experience too. You are absolutely a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, whether or not you do the steps. And I'm a person who really leans into the fact that it's a suggested program of recovery. But I know for myself that like doing the 12 steps and getting a sponsor, it really helped me be able to connect to my group, to my sponsor, to feel that sense of personal connection. It helped me connect to something bigger than myself, which, when I started out, I was not comfortable with the God word. I grew up as a secular, semi-agnostic Jew in San Francisco. And when I came into the rooms, I was mostly like, I still identified culturally as Jewish, but I just really didn't like to think about whether there was a God or whether there wasn't a God or any of that. And then for me, growing up Jewish, the question of personal belief never even really came up. For me, being Jewish was very much about like, what are my actions? Do I keep kosher? Do I not keep kosher? I was a Reformed Jew, so that even went out the door. In that sense, like AA always kind of made sense to me, which, in that saying, fake it till you make it. It's not that you fake your feelings, but you take the actions and you don't worry about like your belief or any of that. Like what's more important is doing the steps, and what you believe and your values and all that will come into, you'll come to realize and become aware of what they are. So when I came in, I did not like the G word. And so when I started reading the big book with a sponsor and doing the steps, I remember hearing someone say, your higher power can be anything that's not you. It can be a doorknob. And I didn't choose a doorknob, but I did decide to choose another word. And I chose the word turtle because there's a story I read about the universe is carried on the back of a giant cosmic turtle. And did I believe that God was a giant cosmic turtle? No. But did the idea make me mad? No. And the word God made me mad. And I could not like be open-minded, and I couldn't experiment. I was all like, ugh. So I just got rid of the word and I replaced it with another word. And so when people used to pray and say, God grant me the serenity, I would say, turtle, grant me the serenity. And when I read the steps, I would smile and laugh because I was making a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of a turtle. And so, was it a joke? I don't know if it was a joke, but it for me, like I said, it got through the wall of anger and fear that the G word brought up. And so I got to have my own experiences with prayer. I got to have my own experiences moving through the world with kind of a spiritual lens. I got to move forward doing the steps and using that conception of a higher power. And then I kind of came to believe in something bigger, in something that I did not know. So I'm one of those people that chose a God not of my understanding. Like I just don't even trip about that, and when I work with sponsees, I really try not to linger too much on whether or not they have a solid conception of a higher power, because ideally whatever higher power you come up with will exceed whatever conceptions or expect will be bigger, right, than what we can think up of. I will also say that I've worked with atheists before, and I've actually found that um, that you know, the spiritual principles and the steps themselves can be a really great higher power. Um, Love, tolerance, hope, faith, right? Faith, it does not necessarily mean actually belief in a deity. Faith is, to me, an orientation towards life. It's believing without visual proof that things will be okay. Um, Likewise, fear is believing without any proof that things won't be okay. And so if we have I really believe that if we have the capacity for fear in our life, then we also have the capacity for faith. And it's just about, what are you putting your energy into? What are you feeding, fear or faith? And so to me, that's why I consider faith a principle, not a belief. Um, I'm all over the place, and I didn't spend a lot of time qualifying as an alcoholic addict. But like I said, I feel like I've been, from the very moment I was born, addicted to changing the way I felt. And I used many different things. I've been in recovery for an eating disorder almost as long as I've been in AA. My sobriety date is June 28th, 2006. And I'm really grateful for the life AA gave me. I don't know if I would have been alive. Um, I've had a lot of similar consequences to other alcoholics and addicts when you hear their stories. My bottom was not super low, but it wasn't super high. I actually think that my drinking story was just kind of a nice, regular, boring, progression that took place over time and kind of went off the rails after college. But I've been sober longer than I drank. So over 15 years, and I'll be celebrating in the end of this month, 16 years. And I'm really grateful for that. I think I'm almost out of time. So I guess what I want to finish is that 15 years isn't the longest time. There are people nowadays with a lot more than 15 years, but there is something that I think does happen, which is, we have to continue progressing and growing in this life and in AA, and trying different things in AA to keep things interesting. And I went through kind of a dark night of the soul. My eating disorder was really out of control. In the pandemic, it got out of control again too. So it's not like, it hasn't been as smooth as my alcohol recovery. But and then in 2014, after like isolating a lot for like 3 years and just barely being able to attend, AA meetings maybe once or twice a week, and just being really depressed and sad, I attended an all California young people's conference in the East Bay. And around the same time, I had also took a GSR role because I decided I need to get more involved in service. And so in that same weekend, I collected my first group conscience as a GSR and attended, and then also attended a young people's conference. And at that young people's conference, I met my area's delegate. And so I got really on fire in just like one weekend for both young people in AA and general service. And I've kind of thrown myself into that. I currently serve on the NorCal bid for ICYPAA, and it's maybe the second young people's committee I've gotten the experience. I'm also serving as a district chair in general service. As I said, I think everyone can get involved in general service. You don't have to be a GSR to be involved in general service. You just have to participate in the process. And the future of AA is in our hands. And I personally want AA to be around for the alcoholic who isn't born yet. There are alcoholics who were born the year I got sober, right? And they're just coming into these rooms. And if they're lucky, they find a group like this or another young people's group to be a part of. And I want the language of our literature to speak to them. I want them to find a safe and welcoming environment. And I'm responsible for creating that environment in my home group. And then I can create that for AA as a whole by participating in our general service process. which means letting my delegate know what my groups think, or you can let your GSR know. So thank you so much for letting me share.